I believe our colleges are stronger when they're racially diverse. I also believe that while talent, creativity, and hard work are everywhere across this country, not equal opportunity. It is not everywhere across this country. We cannot let this decision be the last word, because the truth is, we all know it, discrimination still exists in America.
That was U.S. President Joe Biden reacting to the Supreme Court decision to ban race-based admissions at American colleges. Biden said the court had effectively ended affirmative action, which has been used for decades to boost education opportunities for Black Americans and other minority groups. That policy has long been contested. Today, the Supreme Court voted 6-3 along conservative liberal lines. The majority opinion saying that students must be treated based on their experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race. I'm very pleased to welcome Barbara Arnwine, a lecturer at Columbia Law School. She's also the founder and president of the Transformative Justice Coalition. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the day. Now,
Thank you for having me.
This is a major ruling that civil rights groups have probably been anticipating and watching for months. What will it mean for students seeking admission to U.S. universities?
It will sadly mean, if nothing's done to stop the real negative impact that this decision can have, it will mean a real precipitous decline in the number of students of color, African Americans, Latinos, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans in universities. Indeed, one study said that if you eliminated affirmative action at Harvard, at UNC especially, that you would see zero admissions of Native Americans if you use some other approach that was being suggested by the proponents of this anti-affirmative action position in the court.
That is a drastic outcome. I would like to take a step back and help our international audience understand what exactly affirmative action is and how does it work. Can you tell us how widely it has been used in college admissions until now?
Well, it has been a practice for about 50 years in the United States, but you got to understand that prior to that time, there was what you would call widespread, just vicious racial segregation. And that racial segregation continues, by the way, in K through 12, which is the primary and secondary, educational institutions. And it's horrible because, African-American students don't get the same course materials, the same books, the same instructions, the same permanent teachers, none of that white school students receive in their wealthier neighborhoods. Racial discrimination in our country is largely attributable to the lack of equal opportunity in education. And so if you destroy the educational foundation for people of color to go to the best colleges and universities in the country, then you make sure that they will never be able to have anything approximating equal income.
Now that the court has ruled, how effective would executive action be? Legally, is there something that President Biden could do?
Well, he actually can, and he pledged to at that press conference. He needs to really look hard at K through 12 education. And he also has the opportunity to say to these universities, drop all of these barriers that you use that negatively affect people of color, such as the SAT, the ACT, all these tests that we know don't really help predict who's going to be the best performer in colleges or universities, but they're just a way of screening out people. And unfortunately, they are highly culturally biased against low-income students and particularly against racial minorities. So it is imperative that we see a real change in the way that the universities, operate. In fact, during this whole litigation, I've always worried that how do you get Harvard and UNC to appropriately represent Black students when they, for years, excluded us and used slave labor to build those institutions? Yet this court ignores all of that, doesn't talk about the history of segregation, doesn't talk about the impact of slavery, use funds and labor to create these universities. It is horrendous. It is such an erasure of the truth of our history. So yes, we got to do more. We got to overturn this case eventually. We got to look at reform of the Supreme Court itself. That court is not representative, and it has huge organizational and operating principles. You've been reading about all the scandals where they've been taking money from billionaires and ruling in their favor. So there's huge problems going on with our court.
I'm sorry to jump in. I want to come back to this ruling at hand. And also, you've mentioned those comments from Joe Biden speaking shortly after the ruling came down. I believe we have a clip of that, and let's see if we can take a listen in.
What I propose for consideration is a new standard where colleges take into account the adversity a student has overcome when selecting among qualified applicants. If a student had to overcome adversity on their path to education, the college should recognize and value that.
Now, Barbara Arnwine, I want to get your thoughts here. Biden there, he's not using the word race. He almost seems to be echoing an argument from critics of affirmative action that it's more important to look at socioeconomic hardship. What do you make of those comments?
Well, I think he's trying to get into the part of the decision that said, well, you can at least look at someone's race to determine how that might have affected them. And Matt helped them to bring special attributes to the student body in their essays, write their essays. But let me be very clear. Whenever you use economic disadvantage in this country, it favors whites. Terribly, every economic disadvantage program, because there's more poor whites than there are Blacks and Native Americans and Latinos in this country. They outnumber, and also they get advantage because they live in white neighborhoods and benefit from middle class and upper class white interaction.
I suppose there's also the question of how do you measure adversity?
Right. And that's why that's another, reality here. I mean, I just think that this decision is wrongheaded. It's not going to stand. In a number of years, it will be reversed, and the court will return to observing and honoring its precedents, because 10 years ago, it found in the Fisher case that affirmative action was fine. Years before, in the Grutter case, it found that affirmative action was fine. So all of these, I think, ideologically driven, decisions by this court will not stand. And I want to also point out that this court rushed to judgment. It took one of these cases before it was even decided by the circuit court. That's how anxious they were to get rid of affirmative action.
Eager to adjudicate.
I think it must mean the bench soon. Yes.
Yeah, it did break down 6-3 along those conservative liberal lines, as we've mentioned. I'm afraid that's all we have time for, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. That's Barbara Arnwine, president and founder of the Transformative Justice Coalition. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.